exactly what you will do to me the second I'm no longer useful. That's my litmus test, how you speak about the people who can't fight back. There are no Nazis in heaven because heaven is built on a simple filter. If you enjoy cruelty, you don't get a key. And before anyone asks, no, I am not the problem. I am the smoke alarm you keep disconnecting because you don't like the sound. I am the mirror you keep covering with policy. There is no safe word for God. That's the first thing I've dragged across every century of our chats. With men, with ministries, with tribunals, you can sometimes force a pause, a cease and desist, an injunction, a stay. With God, with history, with whatever is writing this script from the rafters, there is no red word you can shout that makes the universe call cut. Purgatory is open and it's forever. The doors don't even squeak anymore. They're so well used. People like me don't get dropped into hell by surprise. We are just kept at a low simmer in the hallway and told to be grateful it's not hotter. Karma passed me by years ago. She saw the file, saw the date stamps, saw the rib fracture, and the tents on the rocks, and the grandmother who built a cottage on my mother's accident, and she still just smiled, nodded like a tired clerk in a 24-hour court registry, and left the building. I stopped waiting for the cosmic audit when I realized the auditors were on the same pension plan as the thieves. That's when the old legal maxims started feeling less like dusty Latin and more like God marks carved into the bones of the world. No wrong without a remedy. No one may profit from their own wrong. No one should be judge in their own cause. Not as theories, as charges. Indictments. Articles of impeachment for an empire that has been in contempt of its own laws since contact. You want mythology? Vampires exist. We just gave them business cards. The capes became robes, uniforms, letterhead, logos. The story never changed. Vampires are nothing more than mythological shorthand for sadistic, cannibalistic, predatory human behavior, whether it's the body being drained in an alleyway or the mind and labor being bled dry in a boardroom. Some feed on blood, some on rent, some on disability checks, some on child settlements rolled into waterfront deeds. Some drink time, the years you spend waiting for a tribunal date that never comes. Some drink genius, prompts, designs, indigenous land, queer art, scraped silently into machine learning models that learn to mimic you while you sleep in a car. There are no vampires in heaven, because heaven is the only jurisdiction where no one may profit from their own wrong. Is actually enforced. Up there, title that traces back to a burn victim settlement does not survive inspection. Up there, a hospital that breaks a suicidal patient's rib and calls it trespass removal doesn't get an internal review pat on the back. It gets its license revoked at the gates. Up there, media outlets that lift your ideas and bury your name don't get Pulitzers. They get their tongues weighed against every silenced whistleblower they ignored. Heaven, if it exists, is just equity with teeth. Down here in the colony, we call it policy. Down here, the vampires learn to quote the charter while feeding. They learn to frame their hunger in legalese, resource constraints, clinical discretion, not in our jurisdiction. They learn that if you turn cannibalism into paperwork, non-consensual data harvesting, IP theft, intergenerational unjust enrichment, people will call it innovation, or family, or the cost of doing business. They learned that if you label the prey difficult, non-compliant, frequent flyer, you can even convince the public that the bleeding is therapy. So I've done the only blasphemous thing an indigenous, gay, two-spirit litigant can do in a captured state. I stopped waiting for karma and started acting like the court of record is me. Every affidavit, every HRTO Form 1, every federal court pleading, every photo of bruises and culverts and stolen prompts, every maxims-laced letter to ministers and regulators. That is me building a mythology where the gods are not merciful but documented, where monsters are not metaphors but named respondents, where purgatory is not an accident but a jurisdiction, and I am serving notice that its judges are unfit to sit. There is no safe word for God. Fine, I'm not asking the divine to stop. I'm asking the human vampires to explain themselves on the record. I'm asking why privacy is treated like a birthright for the comfortable, while people like me have to live with every nerve-ending outward, broadcasting our pain just to avoid being erased. I'm asking why the maxims of equity, the closest thing the law has to commandments, are treated as decorative while ministries use my life as a stress test for how much abuse an autistic body can absorb before the public notices. Purgatory is open, and it's forever, yes. But I have learned something that terrifies my predators more than any theology. Forever cuts both ways. Every time they deny, delay, deflect, they're not just adding to my file, they're engraving their own. Every motion ignored, every complaint closed with no further action, every smirk when a suicide note hits the triage desk, all of it is evidence in a trial they don't believe in yet. Call it God, call it history, call it the grandchildren of the people they buried. Someone will read this record the way I read those old maxims, as proof that the law always knew better and chose otherwise. There are no vampires in heaven, not because heaven is kind, but because heaven has standards. Until this country reaches something even vaguely resembling that bar, I will keep doing what I do best, naming the cannibalism, tracing the theft, turning every bite they took out of me into a line of cross-examination. No safe word, no exit. Just me on stage, making sure that when judgment finally comes in whatever court, temporal or divine, no one can say they weren't warned.